Hello? Yeah, we're working. Hi, everybody. Please take your seats. We're going to get started here in just a second. All right, should we just do this? You ready? All right. Are you? I don't think you're on. Can you guys hear him?
Yes.
All right, we're good. I'm Tom Foster. I am one of the editors at large of Inc. magazine. Really pleased to be here today with Carey Smith. And Carey doesn't require a whole lot of introduction, but in addition to being a columnist for Inc., Carey is the founder of a company called Big Ass Fans that I'm sure you've seen their products. Big Ass Fans with a lot of big ass fans. Um, Big Ass Fans founded in 1999, I believe.
Yes.
And for 17, 18 years, ran this company. Was, I want to say, for 11 years on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing companies in America. That is nearly unprecedented, I believe. 11 years consecutive. Is that right?
You're the one that should know.
11 years.
I don't
though.
have to remember these sorts of things, do I?
I don't. Yeah, you should. But a really accomplished entrepreneur. In 2017, sold the company for $500 million, $50 million of which went straight to his employees. And then since then, big props. Since then, Carey moved to Austin. Big Ass was based in Lexington, Kentucky. Moved to Austin and started something called Unorthodox Ventures, which is a venture capital and sort of incubator of a really interesting and diverse assortment of companies across a whole bunch of different industries. I want to talk a little bit about that to start off and just sort of what you're doing there. But really our purpose here today for this is that Carey believes that there is no business challenge too large for him to be able to solve on the spot. So it's a bit of a challenge for him and a bit of a challenge for you guys. Please have your questions ready. We're going to throw it to the audience like right away. What are get specific. What are the things? Think of this as like click and clack for cars, but it's click and clack for business. And Carey is both click and clack. But first off, can you just tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing with Unorthodox Ventures and sort of what ties the family of companies together that you've partnered with so far there?
Well, when I sold the fan company, I asked the guys. Well, the first thing is there were some guys at the fan company that the PE firm saw no reason to retain. It was they made up the R&D department, and if you know anything about PE firms, you realize that R&D is like the last thing they would be interested in, because that's, looking to the future, building new products, understanding the markets. So they saw right off the bat they could cut those guys out, and they were all fairly young people, and I asked them where they wanted to move because I had no interest in staying in Lexington. It's a fine town if you're a horse, but that's about it. And we bopped. We looked at a number of places at Dallas. We looked at Palo Alto. Well, we looked at Palo Alto for a hot 15 minutes, but then I realized that, hey, I just given these guys like 50 million bucks. I wasn't going to pay them enough money to live in Palo Alto. But we looked at Atlanta and Charlotte and all over, and they wanted to move to Austin, and I think that's what we did. Though I did do this. We made that decision in the springtime, and so they were ready. It was ready to move like in June, and I decided that probably since they weren't from around here, and the temperatures are like triple digit at the time, and they're from Kentucky, that we should postpone the move until the fall. And I don't think they hold that against me, but I don't ask too much. But what we started doing was we invested in other companies. And I know zero about venture capital, and it turns out you really don't have to know anything about venture capital. So I was in good company, but we looked at the market in a slightly different way because we were operators. All the guys and gals that came across with me were engineers or marketing people, or had opened foreign offices, or were analytics people, and so we know a little bit more than the typical VC person, because, as you probably know, VCs are like bankers, and the only people that know less about business than bankers are lawyers and maybe finance guys and engineers and doctors. But anyway, um, they don't know too much about it. And our take was that we not only had the money to help invest, but we had the experience, just the on the ground experience to help them build a business, and so that's what we've been doing. And we had a couple of guys, one guy in particular that was entrepreneurial, that came over with me, and we built a business around his um, concept. But outside of that, we invest a lot in. We should invest in brake pads, I guess. What the hell is that? That's crazy. Uh, in med tech, which is sort of cool. It's interesting. It's hard, so it makes it interesting. But that basically is what we've been doing.
And in this role, obviously, you're working very closely with a pretty wide assortment of entrepreneurs and getting all kinds of questions about their businesses. And I want to, again, as I said at the outset, throw this to the audience as quickly as possible, and let's try to really put Carey on the spot. And start off. Who has a question for Carey about their business? This is the Founders House. We should have a lot of founders who are facing a lot of really interesting dilemmas. Anybody want to brave starting the first question? We have one right there, halfway back.
Oh, hello. If you have no board and you have 4 companies per se, and they all grow really, really fast, how essentially, like, there's no way to grow kind of like, when you're under 50 employees and you're in apartments and you have that feel and that love and that kind of thing, and like you're really intimate with your customers, and then you grow super fast where you can't even get that, you can't even train that in and onboarding to your new employees, for example. But that's your reputation in the market, and now your product is maybe not 100% like it used to be, product, service, whatever it is. Like, how do you bring that home? Can you, when you're at like 150?
That was a weird question, because I
Yep.
couldn't figure out what the hell where you were going with that.
Sorry.
But I'll tell you what I'm going to answer is the part about the 150 and about the culture. I think business culture is very important to have a good, solid culture. I think that it's always from the top down. It's not free. It's one that you have to live. I mean, if you expect the people that are working with you to treat your customers like, they walk on water, then by God, you better be treating them that way as well.
Yeah.
Additionally, if you expect your employees to do that, it's foolish to imagine that an employee that is not well treated, well paid, well compensated, well taken care of for, that's going to treat somebody that way. So that's a piece there. I honest to God, the company, we had offices all over, but the majority of our company was in one city. I don't know how you maintain a culture if you're not in front of the people that are working with you. I don't know how you do it. And people would ask me, and they'd say, "Oh, Carey, you've got this great culture, and everybody likes to work for you and all this happy stuff. And you have these offices in Malaysia and in Australia and Canada and all this stuff. I mean, how do you do that?" And it's like, oh, I don't really do that, because it's virtually impossible to do that. The best you can do is the people that you work with that are running those offices, those operations, have to be as close to you as you can make it, because I don't know how you do it. You would have to be continually on the road, and I think if you were continually on the road, you would have a totally different culture. So I'm a big proponent. I'm not a big proponent of having everybody work in different locations. That's very hard. Everything I've ever done has been. I mean, we're a very, very collaborative group. We work very closely together. Everybody. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that otherwise. Now, if you're just coding or you're, you know, walking dogs or something, I guess you could do it, but I don't know how you do it otherwise. Thanks.
Anybody else have a question for Carey to go next? We have one right here, row 2.
Hello. So one of the struggles of any startup is dealing with where you're at now versus where your vision's at, right? Where you want to push the company. And as you stated, especially when you're in the tech space and you're really pushing far ahead and you're talking to people who maybe don't understand technology, I would say that's one of our hardest bridges to kind of come across, right? We're pushing a technology into the future and we're projecting where we want to be, but we're talking to people that just don't.
That's your fault.
So how do we make that bridge between kind of pushing the future and talking with financial people that are very much in the now?
I try not to talk to financial people. I don't know what the hell this got to do with business. I will say that we made a mistake at the fan company. We thought the whole IoT thing. We were close to Nest, and we got close to Google for a while, and we actually thought that there was a path to the to IoT, to the connected home, but nobody was really interested in that. The customers weren't. We were, because that's the way we looked at life, but it wasn't true. It wasn't there. And so I wasted a lot of money, a whole lot of money, trying to do that and trying to explain that, but you can't explain it because you don't get it. I mean, I didn't get it. I didn't get that those people didn't agree with me. They didn't think that was important. What they wanted was a fan. Why the hell was I talking about controlling their air conditioning system and reducing the amount of conditioning that they would need in their house day over day? They weren't interested in that. That's not the way they looked at it. So I think when you're in a situation like that, first thing you've got to do is you're responsible for everything, always. I mean, it's never anybody else's fault. If it's somebody else's fault, well, it's never anybody else's fault. You can't do anything about it if it's not your fault. So I think you have to recognize that part. The other part is thinking ahead of the market is not a good thing to do. Now, if you're thinking ahead of a finance guy, I mean, well, thank God. I mean, I've got a cat that could think outside, think ahead of a finance guy. But so I don't. If that's all you're talking about, I mean, you should get one of your minions to talk to him. Save you the grief.
I'm going to jump in and I want to ask a question and keep your questions coming. We'll go right back to the audience. But so you have at Unorthodox, we were talking right before we came up on stage, that you have talked to around 3,000 companies, entrepreneurs who might want you to invest in their companies. You have to date partnered with 8 to 10 companies. It begs the question: what are you looking for? What when you're looking at an entrepreneur, when you're looking at a company, what are the opportunities that look like ones that you're interested in investing in?
I think it's interesting when as I said, prior to moving to Austin, I had never really thought about investment or investing at all. And I assumed when we came here that the important thing was finding a good product, and that it should be a business basically was product driven, because that was my experience. It became obvious to me after a year or so, 2 years, that wasn't the case, that you could actually have a really good product, something that was very interesting, and have potentially have a good market. But if the people that were running it, if the entrepreneur, the founder, was not either experienced, and I hate to say experienced, because I mean, you can learn a lot on your own, um, but was not focused on the business, it was going to fail. And when I mean, we didn't invest. Obviously, we're sort of picky about who we invest with, but even given that, we've made mistakes, and we've had situations where the companies just went out of business. But normally, it wasn't because, I mean, all of these products are very good. I mean, they really are. It's just that the people that were running them didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have a plan. A lot of them don't have any plans at all. Their plan starts with, I'm going to sell coffee creamer, and the coffee market in this country is $1 billion, and the creamer market therefore has to be, $500 million or a couple of $1 billion, and I should be able to get an X% of that, and that's what my market's going to be, and I'm going to sell it in a store. Anyway, it's just a bunch of stuff, and there's no way that ideas like that make it anywhere. Hopefully, you guys are far beyond this, and you may know this. But a lot of companies, a lot of businesses that we saw, they have a very difficult time with this. And again, at the end of the day, it's the driver are the founders, are the entrepreneurs. Much more important than the product.
Who's next? Right here. Oh, sorry. We have two.
What about mentors? I'm under some pressure right now to connect with someone who can help guide the growth of our business, maybe expand our products. Do you have a mentor, somebody at a critical moment in your growth that helped kind of provide perspective? I mean, my dad's a good guy, and so is my wife, but I'm like, somebody who's really been in the business. And where did you look for guidance at those critical moments?
I think that's one of the things that I'm very sensitive to people that are in this situation, because I didn't really have a mentor. I didn't look at it that way. And I was older too. I mean, I was like, when I started the fan company, I was like 47. So, and we lived in this little town, or in Lexington, the horses and all. And I didn't look at life that way, and I didn't have a mentor per se. I think that may be overdone a bit. I do think it's interesting if you can get together in groups like this, where you trade stories, though. I don't know any other way to do it. I talk to a lot of people about this. What's interesting, I think, about mentorship may be how little people listen to what you have to say. And I used to give a lot of talks to students, college students, and it was amazing. You walk in and try to imagine what I could possibly say that would be of any interest to these kids, and what would they take from it, because that's the only thing you have to concentrate on. And inevitably, it was full of a bunch of guys that didn't pay any fucking attention at all. And then about typically 3 or 4 girls that paid attention, which was crazy. And they would be the ones that asked the questions and actually had some, brain cells. But that, I think it's very difficult, because I think that especially entrepreneurs, they're a focused group, and it's very, you have to imagine that if I told you what to do, from my perspective, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't listen to it. I mean, that sounds terrible, but I think you might listen to it after it moved around in your head, conceivably, and maybe in a couple of years. So it's like farming, you know, it's, or like gardening. It's, you plant the seeds, but most of them don't come up. I'm not a good gardener then. I guess that's what that means.
Is that how gardens work? Yeah. We had another question right here in the.
So, hi, Carey. First of all, I just want to say that I know you were mentioning earlier that when finance people talk to you, you typically don't really understand what they're saying. As a previous finance major, I can also say we don't know what we're saying either.
Thank you.
So, but my question, I wanted to ask something a little bit topical, which was, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and founders here today. So, what my question was is, and you kind of touched on this earlier, where you were saying with culture, it's a little difficult that you imagine to you for there to be culture unless people are kind of all together. And I think right now in the current state, and a very kind of topical note is, a lot of work is moving to remote. Also, the founders here, there's some that are brick and mortar, some that are remote, some that are kind of variety. So what advice would you have in terms of for these kinds of companies to focus on when they're kind of bringing in staff, whether they're remote or whether they're brick and mortar, to kind of keep that culture? What would you recommend?
I think that when I say that working remote is difficult, I mean for the type of businesses that I've been involved in, and so we're not talking about software. We're talking about engineering. We're talking about actually building products, and that's very difficult. And I think even running marketing is very difficult when you're remote. In terms of if I had to deal with a lot of people that were remote, I think that I would make it a practice to get out and see them all the time. I don't know how else you do this. I mean, people are sentient beings. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And you can read the New York Times until it all comes off on your fingers, and it's not going to make any difference. People are the same. People, in order to motivate people, it's a person to person thing. If it's not the job they're doing, and in all probability the job you're doing isn't all that important. I mean, if they can work without you, then what are you doing? And so, I mean, you're just a taskmaster at that point. And so I think that if you're going to do this sort of thing, if you have to work within that environment, you really do have to be very, very active. You have to be. I don't know how else you do it. I mean, sending flowers isn't going to cut it.
We have a question here, third row.
Good afternoon, Carey, and thanks for joining us. So my question is, for one, I've heard that building a fund is very similar to building a startup. And so I wanted to ask you about Unorthodox Ventures and just what was your strategy as far as like finding LPs and building out the fund?
I don't have a fund, and I apologize.
Sorry about
if I
that.
said that. It's just my money.
Okay.
I would have a hard time listening to it, but well, let me tell you, I think that's interesting because having a fund means, I mean, you have a fiduciary responsibility to all these people. And we don't have to do that. And we were actually just about 2 months ago, we were suggesting that maybe we ought to look at building a fund. But I don't know. I think you have to be, if we ever put together a fund, we're going to know what the hell we're doing. And so many of these people put together funds, and it's just sort of loosey goosey, and they do it for the 2% and I mean, that's what they do. It's nothing. So I'm sorry. I'm not a big fund guy. So was there another question in there that didn't, or is that just it? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
All right. Hi, Carey. So 2 questions. One, who is the banker that hurt you? Because you seem like somebody hurt you.
There were none. I'm just that way. But I tell you, you'd say banker, and you think banker, not banker writ large, banker writ small. What was funny is we were talking before we got here about ink, and I know I probably read the first, second, third, fourth, fifth issue of that magazine, and I was convinced that I could go to the bank with a good idea, and I could sell it, right? Yeah, they're like, yeah, no, it doesn't work that way because you don't have any money in the bank. So if you want to borrow $100,000, you need $100,000. terrible experience with a banker. Oh, and another one. I ran into a problem one time. We had some people that did a data dump. I mean, took all of our data. Some employees, some great people, and so I sued them. And the But in the meantime, because they had done this, I mean, the business was like tanking because I mean they took all their customer list. It was just a mess. And so here I am. I've got a lawyer. I've got a banker, and we're spending money, and we're not making a lot of money. And both of those guys, both of them, princes. So the first off, the lawyer says, "Hey, we're going to have to stop representing you because you hadn't paid the bill." And it's like, come on, man, give me a little bit of time. And the banker, same damn way, same damn way. And as a matter of fact, one of the bankers I met years later, and I told this story about how much I didn't like bankers because when you actually need a banker, they're heading for the door. I mean, they are totally risk averse. And he's like, "Oh no, it couldn't have been our bank." It's like, "No, it wasn't your bank, but it was a bank." So anyway, that's all I got.
Well, thank you for giving me an honest answer to a very just funny question. But no, my real question really is going through the latter part of Big Ass Fans. What was one key takeaway when you went through the sale that you could give everyone? Just obviously, we're talking a lot about starting a company, but would love some sort of insights into what's selling a company.
I think the most important thing from my point of view, and I had people that worked with me that handled the day-to-day of that because one of us had to run a business and we had to keep going, but was that I said that I needed $500 million. That was it. And that was it. And I put about that much thinking into it. I really did. I put no thinking, which was a mistake. And I realized that later, but that was a mistake because I didn't think about it. And I was totally ambivalent, and I really was. And that's what I said. And so when these people actually came and were interested in it, I mean, it's like, well, that's hard to believe you'd be interested in because that was worth more than I thought the company was worth, obviously. But as we went through it, the expectation is that you're going to lower your ask, or that they're going to give you a number and they're going to offer you 350, and you're going to go, well, gosh, I've been thinking about spending that $500 million and, I want to do that. I've got all these things I want to do, but nothing. I just said that was it. And I think that was a very, very strong position. And I honestly didn't put that much thought into it, but they came back, the guys that finally got down to it, and they came back to me and they're like, well, so here it is. It's going to be 470. And I was like, we're all grown-ups, but I said really nasty things. And I had a banker at Credit Suisse that was handling this for me, and she was a great woman. But I told her, I just told her what I thought of people that would offer me that when I told them what I wanted, and they can just all go fuck off, and I didn't care. But I really, really didn't care, which means I probably should have asked for more. And I realized that. But I think that that's the point, is that whenever you do that, if you want to sell your business, you should be completely ambivalent. And that's, again, in any negotiation, if you walk away from it, if they know you're going to walk away because you're just right there, you just really don't care. And they're lucky you're talking to them. And I think that's an important piece.
Okay, so I have a question. Of the companies that are in the Unorthodox Ventures portfolio, one of them is a company that makes sort of high design hand sanitizer dispensers, right, for buildings. And I looked at that idea and I thought, well, why do you need a new company for that? What's the moat for that? You've got great design. who's to say if that starts to take off that the prevailing hand sanitizer dispenser company can't just come in and make their own high design version of that and put you out of business quickly. And it, to me, like thinking about it, well, there's parallels to Big Ass Fans also. What do you do when you look at an idea that's a really great product, but there's an existing market there with really large companies that could simply take that design idea and say, all right, great, we're going to do this ourselves?
Yeah, but there's more to it than that. And if all it is design, that's a little bit of a problem. And I think that both with the fan company and with Vosk, which is the hand sanitizer, I think that you've got to bring more to the party. There's all sorts of things. There's all sorts of there's the design, there's the mechanics, there's the electronics within it, there's the channel. There's all sorts of ways to distinguish a particular product. I think that in this particular case, we have all of those lining up. In addition to that, when you look at the competition is like what the guys here have got on the walls. They're just little cheapy plastic things, and that's fine for a lot of places. I mean, it really is. I mean, you don't need anything more than that. But the companies like the Shangri-La Hotel or the Mandarin Orient, or law offices, or high-end boutiques, I mean, that's pretty crappy. I mean, if you're gonna spend $800 on a pair of shoes, to imagine that, they can't do any better than to hang a bag of goop on the wall. I mean, that says a lot. And so it's going for, in this particular case, we're looking at a particular market, because we don't look at, and you shouldn't. I mean, we were selling fans, but we weren't selling fans. We'd sell fan to anybody, but the part of the market that we were interested in was about 5% of the market. I mean, you have to focus no matter what you're doing. When somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, we're going to change the world," then my brain goes, it turns off, because you can't do that. I mean, you have to have a focus, and that's where the hand sanitizer is, which I think is interesting. I think that it's interesting.
Audience, I have a question in the back.
So first of all, we have a music venue with a Big Ass Fan. Thank you for that. It's fantastic. I have an agency a creative agency that we've grown to about 8 figures, and it's all the people doing all the things. I've stepped back into like a CMO role, and I'm really fucking bored now. So am I at the point where like I'm successful and I should be happy, or do I just let them run it and I go somewhere else? What do you do at this point in your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, see, I made a mistake, and you could argue I made a mistake, because I was there, and so you've got to do something, because you can't do what you're doing because it's just effing boring. And I'm glad I'm not doing the fans anymore. I can't even imagine thinking about fans, and people will say, "Oh, look at all this." Like, yeah, who cares? And so that's where you are. The one thing that I think about is, could I have taken that company and said, "Okay, I'm going to have somebody else run the company. The team is going to run the company. I'm going to do something else that's related to the company." And we always did a lot of iterations, product iterations. But after a while, you're always thinking about the same thing in the same market, and it gets a little dull. But I think in retrospect, I should have, I hate to go back on something I've said, but if I knew a little bit more about finance, I could have done this, I think. But I would have had it so that I could have started another business, because I could have started anything, because you have this crazy brand, and people are going to listen to you. Like you guys, apparently you've got nothing better to do with your lives, and this is what you're doing. I mean, it's fascinating that you would be in that situation and let me know it, but that's the way it is. But no, seriously, I think in that situation, you ought to spend a little bit of time there, because no matter how much money you get, it doesn't, after a while, it doesn't matter. I mean, can't do anything. I mean, there's nothing there. And so that's not especially interesting. What's interesting is the intellectual challenge of what else you're doing. And that's what's fascinating about having a business. It's like chess at the highest level. So it's cool.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We are running out of time for this session. And Carey, thank you so much for being here.
And I'm not shivering. I
You're
am
not-
cold.
The
but
last
I'm
guy
not
was shivering.
And you took the warm seat. I mean, I hope you recognize that.
These were the rules. We try to
And
keep
you've got
people
the
on the
coat.
spot.
Ah,
And we're below a big-ass fan,
Yeah.
by the way.
it's not doing us any good.
Thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you all very much.